Hey, Shalom Akim, Shalom, Shalom, giving all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Makakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders, great millstone, for teaching us his truth and salutations to the sincere Akim and Aquathim. But listen, may the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Raquai. I'm back in here with another quick lesson. And Lord's will, as always, that this lesson may be edifying. And I guess for today's lesson, I kind of wanted to discuss just a plethora of ideas. I was thinking about because we were recently at last week at the indoor class we were discussing children, and we're discussing um, you know essentially children, but brothers who might have children, you know but when you look at the society, when you look at our children, you look at our men, our young men, especially in this society, a lot of our young men, have the spirit of Cain on them. I was just thinking about it, the way they conduct themselves towards their own kin, and they have that and not even towards, well, yes, against their own kin, against their own brethren, against their own brother, and they have that spirit of killing. They're essentially overly emotional killing machines, and there is no fear of the Lord. There is no wisdom. There is just overly emotion, and it's charged with all this testosterone, which is a, and it's really and truly, when you think about it, it's an absolute recipe for disaster, right? And you know, children are really, especially sons, they're really supposed to be a heritage, but in this society, they're kind of like they're like a burden when you see a lot of these children, the way they behave, and a lot of it Esau has a hand in it. But I kind of just want to discuss a plethora of different things. I might move around here and there, but Lord's will is always that this lesson really and truly is edifying, right? So let me just get into a little bit about you know what occurred between Cain and Abel, right? And how does that really apply, that spirit that I'm referring um, that's on our people, on our sons especially, right? So let's go to Genesis. Um, okay, so this is Genesis chapter 4. I'll start at verse 4, right? And I'll kind of get into why I said that, right? So it says, "And Abel," I'm reading in the NIV, and it says, "And Abel also brought an offering, fat portions, some of the firstborn of his flock. And the Lord Yahweh looked with favor on Abel and his offering." Um, I think in the KJV, I believe it says respect. The Lord had respect unto his offering, right? So, and then it says, "But Cain and his offering did not look with favor." So Cain was very angry, and his face was downcast. Then the Lord Yahweh said unto Cain, "Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast?" Verse 7, "If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin crouching, at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it." And it says, verse 8, "And now Cain said to his brother, Let's go to the field. And while they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him." Right? And it says, And this is Cain's response. So, and the Lord Yahweh said unto Cain, where is that? Where is your brother Abel? I don't know. He replied, am I my brother's keeper? Right. So this is what I'm kind of referring to. There is that spirit that Cain had towards Abel. It was a very distasteful spirit to see that you know um, a son that is doing right, and essentially he had a very strong disregard for his brother, right? And you see that same spirit, that same disregard, and that same distaste, for, you know, um, essentially you see that same distaste, for our young men towards their own people. You don't see them actually have a sense of compassion and a sense of care about, when you look at the behavior of a lot of our young men, today, they don't have a strong regard for caring about their own brother. They don't have that. They're very, and Esau has a hand in this, as I said before, because Esau essentially uses the music to push a certain wicked vibration upon our people, and which entices them to do these kind of behaviors. So it essentially, they're being snared using the music as a medium to channel that same wicked vibration, that same distaste towards their own kin, right? That's why you see, when you look at the music that a lot of these rappers make today, it's always about, deleting your own people. That's that same spirit of Cain, that same distasteful spirit, disregard. Let's just disregard the welfare of your own people. There is no compassion, care, and righteousness found in those lyrics, right? So, you know, and the scriptures do talk about come out of her, my people, right? Because when you come out of Babylon, this is the kind of vibration that Babylon pushes. It pushes a very sinister spirit, a very wicked spirit for your own kin, for having a certain welfare for your own people. And a lot of these, what people call today YNs, they don't have um well, first and foremost, they don't have that reverence for Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, which in turn causes them, that fear. They don't have that, so it causes them to behave the way they do, because this is what happens. And like I said, Esau also has a hand in this. He doesn't get away, right? He also has a hand in partaking in the downfall of our own people. So, I'm just gonna, uh, move around here and there in a couple precepts. Let me go to Sirach. Just bear with me. This is Sirach 10, verse 19. And it says, they that fear the Lord Yahweh, Bashem Yahushai, are a sure seed, and they that love him an honorable plant. They that regard not the law are a dishonorable seed. They that transgress the commandments are a deceivable seed. Right? So it shows you the difference between an honorable and a dishonorable seed. And the way you see a lot of our young men behave today, they behave as dishonorable seeds. They behave as degenerate plants. Because we're supposed to be nobles, and nobles have a certain type of character. They have a certain type of, etiquette to them. But, and this is the crazy thing too. You hear, when you listen to them talk sometimes, they always talk about how they're kings and so on and so forth. But you look at the way they behave, you behave as a bunch of degenerates. You don't have any regard for, the welfare of your own kin, right? That is part of also being a noble. We have certain traits that put us upon stature. We're supposed to be, a wise and understanding people, like it says in Deuteronomy. teach therefore and do them, that this is your wisdom in the sight of your other nations, because this is supposed to way, they're supposed to have a certain type of we're supposed to have a certain type of upstanding character about us. But and in another spirit, if I may add also, another spirit that is upon our people is that spirit of the thuggies. When you go into the history of the thuggies, they take on this persona of the thuggies. When you go into the history of it, they were a bunch of criminals, well thought out, premeditated criminals who used to kidnap and rob, swindle and rehearse their, and not rehearse, but essentially group, what's it called? Group not criminalize, but group, you know, work in a group essentially, right? And when you go into that vibration, it really goes back to that Hindu goddess known as Kali. You spell that Kali, right? And that is a spirit that even our people have adopted today. And we're not supposed to behave like that. We're supposed to be upstanding, wise and understanding people. But you see, when it comes to look at the ways of these other gods and these other nations and so on and so forth, this is the type of behavior that they perpetuate. You know, we're supposed to be. This is the Lord. The Lord's ways are higher. I'm sorry. The Lord's ways are supposed to make us, cultivate us to be higher than these other nations. We're not supposed to be paying homage to these other gods, right? So let me jump over to the 16th verse. I'm sorry, the 16th chapter, because this is the way a lot of our people behave. A lot of our young men and young women even also, behave. This is why culture is so important. This is Sirach 16, verse 1. And it says, desire not a multitude of unprofitable children, neither delight in ungodly sons, right? So when you go into that word profitable, the word in the etymology is useful. So when you look at the landscape of Babylon, and you look at the way a lot of these young men out there behave, they're going into jewelry stores, they're doing all these break-ins, they're essentially, what you're doing, you're really causing a shame and a stain to your nation, right? But you're not useful, you're not productive, right? When you go into the law in regards to stubborn sons, if you had a son that was lazy or a drunkard, or he was a glutton or something like that, when you go into that, he was to be taken to the elders, and then, okay, if he didn't hearken unto the voice of his mother and his father, you take him out and they stone him with stones and they die, right? Because that is supposed to create and instill a sense of fear amongst the others, and like, oh shoot, oh damn, did that happen to Tyrone? Oh, I don't want that to happen to me. You know what I'm saying? But this is what happens when the law, as the scriptures say, the law is slack and proper judgment doesn't go forth, right? So you see essentially in Babylon, proper, judgment doesn't go forth, right? And then you have essentially an overabundance of wickedness that has to be, that hasn't been essentially been checked. You have an over abundance of unchecked wickedness. You have a lump that has so much leaven in it, right? And it shows in the ways and these behaviors of these different YNs. Of these different men that they run around and they're idle. They're kicking in doors. They're doing all these sleep challenges and so on and so forth, right? And these young men are not properly being instructed. They're useless, right? So it says here, verse 2, though they multiply, rejoice not in them, except to the fear of the Lord be with them, right? And that's very, very important, because that is so, it's an underrated amount of wisdom that hasn't been imparted to our children. And children are supposed to be, like a man, as a man, you want to be able to have children. But when you look at the society that we live in, it's like, man, you kind of have it's like, man, I gotta pull out. And let me just put it like that. You can't. It's a burden in this society, and then you have to worry about, what they're exposed to, whether it's on social media, and you have to worry about, the alphabet people, because they always have this weird, unsatiable appetite to be around children, always to be around children, always want to read children's stories, and it's just a lot of filth in this place, man. You know what I'm saying? Verse 3, and it says, trust not thou in their life, neither respect their multitude, for one is just, for one that is just is better than 1,000, and better it is to die without children than to have them that are ungodly, right? Because when you have them ungodly and running around like that, like, that's a shame. You see that, and it's always them that be multiplying, and they multiplying like crazy, and always duplicating themselves. As a matter of fact, I think it says in the 30th chapter, but they do that in a wicked sense. So they don't duplicate essentially a good copy of righteousness. They duplicate themselves in a copy of absolute wickedness, right? So, because a lot of us, yes, brothers, there are some brothers here that they do have children, and may the Lord Yahweh Shemashai have mercy upon your household and your children. But like, for brothers, we don't, some of us who don't have children, right? It's, you're, what, let me just read the precept, right? Because I can't really better explain it rather than if I just read it. This is Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 4, verse 1, and it says, better it is to have no children and to have virtue, for the memorial thereof is immortal, because it is known with the Most High and with men. When it is present, men take example at it, and when it is gone, they desire it and wear it as a crown, right? So, if it comes to the wire, you don't have any children, right? In the kingdom we'll have plenty of children, because you'll be in an environment that's actually healthy for them. You're not going to worry about whose house they go to. You're not going to worry about trivial things like you didn't lock your door at night, and they unlocked the door and they went outside in the cold. You're not going to worry about a lot of the things that you worry about in this society. Like, this society, when you really think about it, it's an absolute war zone. I remember there was this one year in Toronto with this one child. He looked like a Jake. I think he was staying at his grandmother's house, and somehow this 3-year-old managed to get past the security door of the apartment and go outside in the cold. And I remember that day, it was extremely cold that day. And the child went out, and the child was missing. So it was about, I think it was around 5, 6. And they found that child around 10 a.m. And I think about an hour or two later on, the child, I think, ended up passing, right? Obviously, that was a judgment, but, you wouldn't have to worry about these things in the kingdom. I think there's a scripture in Isaiah that talks about a child shall play, with an asp and not be bitten, or something like that, to roughly paraphrase. So, the things that, we worry about, because as a man, as an Israelite man, your sovereignty is really stripped in this society, and it's and a part of that sovereignty is really your children, because of course you want to have your children grow up and, be a righteous copy of you, and that's one of the things that, when you think about it, if I were to equate it to our terms, That's one of the things that Esau is really afraid of. He's really afraid of, us coming back to our power and actually calling upon the names of Yahweh Bashem El Shai, being in alignment with our power. That's what makes us, and none of the other nations know that. They understand that, you know, right? So, um, I'll read verse 2 again. And then it says, when it is present, when it is present, and it says, men take example at it, and when it is gone, they desire it. It weareth a crown, triumpheth forever, having gotten the victory, striving for undefiled rewards. But the multiplying brood of the ungodly shall not strive, nor take deep rooting from bastard lips, nor lay any fast foundation. Right? So, we're supposed to have, we're supposed to be fruitful and multiply. But when you look at it, as Paul said, all things are lawful but not expedient. And as much of it as it is to have wonderful children, when you look at what's going on in this society with all these different protests, you brothers know what I'm talking about, with all these different protests in regards to people coming in, right, into these different countries, right, in the brewing of 2nd Esdras 15, the sedition, and the, what I'm saying, it's not even a healthy environment to actually even bring forth children, because you're worried about their welfare, right? But I guess I just wanted to discuss this for brothers who don't have children, but also as an exhortation, that in the kingdom, it'll be plenty. We'll have plenty of children and be able to actually even enjoy our children, right? Because I think that's even part of the curses too. You can't even enjoy. We wouldn't be able to enjoy our children, right? All these other camps that teach, they teach essentially a prosperity doctrine. Get married and have children and so on and so forth. While that is, a good thing, it's not a very expedient thing, because you're not really measuring the times diligently. You're disregarding the woes, the lamentation, the perils, the dangers, that are to come. So it's not, but anyways, I guess I'll leave the lesson there. But, this is an exhortation. As a matter of fact, I guess I'll end off with this last precept. Hold on. Let me go to, 1 second. I guess I started off with one topic and I ended up talking about another topic. Isaiah, 1 second. This is Isaiah 60 and 22, and it says, a little one shall become 1,000, and a small one a strong nation. I, the Lord, will hasten it in his time, right? So, we'll be able to be in a situation where we'll be able to actually enjoy your children, and actually, you watch them grow up, and you don't have to worry about all these different perils, in this society. You don't have to worry about whose house they go to and who they're playing with, you know what I'm saying? And then they'll be, all righteous, because they'll be, having that, they'll have the laws within their within their minds, right? They'll be perfect, right? So, anyways, I guess I'll just leave that lesson there. But, Lord's will, as always, this lesson was edifying. I'd just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem HaKadosh. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, teaching us his truth. Until next time, I say Shalom.